I still remember the day he walked out on us. It was raining. One of those bitter, sideways rains that seem to slice through your skin. And he didn't even bother to close the door behind him. He just left. No final hug. No apology. Just the sound of his boots splashing down the stairs, the taxi pulling away, and the wind rattling through the hallway like a ghost. I was 25, holding our daughter Clara, barely 2 years old. Wrapped in a threadbare pink blanket, she looked up at me with those round eyes. Eyes that had not yet learned what it meant to be abandoned. I remember thinking, "You will never feel this pain. I'll make sure of it." That was the first promise I made to my daughter, and the first lie I told myself. I worked 3 jobs in those first few years. I cleaned houses in the morning, waitressed at night, and did bookkeeping for a retired accountant in between. I slept maybe 4 hours a night, sometimes less. My body ached constantly, my hands cracked and dry, and my smile, when I had the strength to wear it, was held together with duct tape and hope. But Clara thrived. She was curious and bright, with a laugh like church bells on a summer morning. She loved animals, stories, and brushing my hair, while I graded supermarket coupons at the kitchen table. I couldn't afford new toys, but I could tell a good story, and I had thousands. She never asked why we didn't have a car, or why the heating sometimes clicked off at night. When the other girls showed up in sparkly shoes, Clara walked in proud with her second-hand boots and a homemade headband. I stitched from scraps. She didn't care. She was happy. And so I told myself I had done something right. There were cracks, though. I ignored them, as mothers often do. At 7, she threw a tantrum when she didn't win a drawing contest. "They cheated," she said through tears. "Mine was better." I laughed it off. At 12, she lied to her teacher about me being sick to avoid turning in her homework. I scolded her. She cried. We hugged. At 15, she stopped hugging. She became quieter, sharper. She called our house a shack, criticized the way I dressed, rolled her eyes when I asked about her day. But I didn't push her. Teenagers, right? I gave her space, trusted her, kept cooking her favorite meals, kept folding her laundry with lavender sachets. I believed love was enough. By the time she turned 20, Clara had transformed into a stunning young woman, confident, articulate, cold. She earned a scholarship to a top university, double majored in law and business, and interned at a firm that represented celebrities. I was proud. I cheered her on, sent care packages every month, even though postage costs felt like knife wounds to my budget. She never once said thank you, but I kept sending them anyway. She came home less and less. The last Christmas she spent with me, she stayed for exactly 36 hours. She wore perfume that gave me a headache and rolled her eyes when I offered to cook. "We don't really do gluten anymore," she said. Gluten, as if she was suddenly royalty. That night after she left, I stood in her empty bedroom, clutching a sweater she'd forgotten in the closet. It still smelled like her, like rose and sharpness. I sat down on her bed and sobbed. Years passed. I kept living. I rented out the guest room to students, took up knitting, volunteered at a local shelter. I still worked part-time cleaning houses. Old habits die hard, but I began to feel like maybe, just maybe, life was easing up. Clara didn't call much. Once a month maybe. Always short, always polite. "I'm busy, Mom. Work's insane." I didn't mind. I didn't want to be a burden. I just wanted her to be okay. Then, one day, she came back. It was a Thursday. I remember because I had just finished vacuuming for a client when my phone rang. "Mom," she said, breathless, "I'm coming by tonight. I need to talk to you." She arrived in a sleek black car with tinted windows, dressed in an expensive beige coat red lipstick, sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. She stepped inside like a stranger, looked around the house as if it were a museum, and sat down stiffly at the kitchen table. I brought out the lemon cookies she used to love. She didn't touch them. "I'm buying a house," she said. "A real one. Downtown. It's beautiful." I smiled. "That's wonderful, Clara." She paused, looked at me, but the down payment's complicated. I was thinking, you could sell this place. It's time, don't you think? I blinked. Sell the house? Yes. I mean, it's too big for you, too old. You could get an apartment somewhere nicer, warmer, maybe even a retirement village. I felt my heart seize. "Clara, this is our home." She smiled politely. "It's just a house, Mom." "No," I said softly. "It's not." The fight that followed is something I still replay at night. Clara didn't yell. That wasn't her style. She cut with words, precision. She said things like, "You've held me back my whole life, and you raised me on guilt, not love." She accused me of being manipulative, of using my sacrifices as a weapon. She told me I owed her everything because she turned out successful in spite of this place. I stared at her. This woman, my daughter, the child I had raised with bare hands and aching bones. "I gave you my life," I whispered. She leaned forward, and now I want it back. She left that night. I didn't sleep. The next morning, an envelope arrived by courier. A legal document. Clara was suing me for the house, claiming emotional damages, mental distress. She said she had endured psychological hardship growing up in my care and was seeking compensation for lost potential due to maternal neglect. I dropped the envelope on the floor. I couldn't breathe. The first time I saw my daughter's name in the news, it wasn't for winning a case or advocating justice. It was a headline on a local legal blog. "Young lawyer sues own mother over property dispute. Claims emotional neglect." I didn't read the article at first. I couldn't. My hands trembled too hard to scroll. Instead, I sat in the kitchen, staring at my chipped mug of tea, the one Clara gave me on Mother's Day when she was 10. World's best mom. The handle was cracked. Much like me, Clara didn't call. She didn't explain. A week after that awful visit, I received another letter, this one from her attorney, demanding immediate vacating of the property under pending litigation. It wasn't just a house anymore. It had become a battleground, and she was standing at the other end, aiming straight at me. I found a lawyer through a friend at church. His name was Tomasz, a kind middle-aged man with thick glasses and a quiet voice. He read through the papers in silence, then looked up at me with genuine confusion. This is madness," he said. "She's serious," I whispered. Tomasz nodded, slowly. "She's not just filing a claim. She's using legal language that suggests public exposure, media, reputation damage. Are you prepared for that?" Was I? I didn't know. But I had survived nights without food. I had walked to work in the snow with holes in my shoes. I had raised a daughter alone, without love or support, for over 2 decades. I had buried my pride too many times to count. I looked Tomasz in the eye. "I'm not giving her this house." Clara's lawsuit unfolded like a slow-motion train crash. Each day brought something new. An affidavit from an old neighbor claiming I yelled too much. A psychologist's note Clara presented from a single session years ago. Statements from classmates about how poor and embarrassed she felt growing up. She was painting a picture, not of truth, but of trauma, of a mother who suffocated her ambitions, used poverty as control, and manipulated her into staying out of guilt. It hurt more than I can describe, because somewhere in the middle of those exaggerated words, there were tiny kernels of truth. Yes, I cried in front of her sometimes. Yes, I made her skip field trips we couldn't afford. Yes, I worried too much, hugged too hard, said things like, "You're all I have." But I never hurt her. Not the way she now claimed I had. I stopped going to the market. People stared. The cashier who once gave me a free loaf of bread looked away awkwardly when I approached. Even the old librarian at the community center, who'd known me since Clara's childhood, avoided eye contact. I had become that woman, the one whose daughter wanted to erase her. The court date was set for mid-April. Tomesh told me the judge would likely throw out most of her claims. "This won't go far," he assured me. "But the emotional damage, I can't protect you from that." I nodded. At night, I stayed awake, not thinking about the trial, but about the memories she had twisted. The time I baked cupcakes for her birthday, but forgot the icing because I was too tired. The time I grounded her for lying about schoolwork and she cried herself to sleep. The time I said, "I gave up everything for you," and meant it as love, but maybe she heard it as a burden. I began to wonder, had I failed? Had I given her too much and not enough? All at once, then, the unthinkable happened. A TV segment aired, Clara in a tasteful navy suit, sitting across from a talk show host, telling the story of her survival. "My childhood was complicated," she said, voice soft, eyes downcast. "I loved my mother, but love doesn't erase damage. It doesn't fix what was broken." She talked about growing up in a house of shadows, about emotional instability, about a life stolen by guilt and scarcity. She never named me directly, but everyone knew, and she was praised for it. The comments flooded in. "She's so brave. More women should speak up about toxic motherhood. This is why therapy matters." I sat in silence as the screen blurred before my eyes. Brave? I had braved the dark when she was sick at 2 a.m. I had braved a life of emptiness so she could feel full, but the world was clapping for her, not me. Tomash called later that week, with a trembling in his voice I didn't like. "There's something you should see," he said. He forwarded me an email leak. Clara's ex-boyfriend, a man I barely knew, had contacted the legal board. In it were screenshots, messages Clara had sent, planning to use emotional abuse as a legal angle to gain ownership of the house. "It's strategy," she had written. "She'll fold under pressure." She even joked, "All she's got is some knitting and a broken TV. I'll offer her a care home brochure as a thank you." I read those words 10 times. Then I cried so hard, I thought my chest would burst. We submitted the screenshots to the court. It shifted everything. Suddenly, Clara's case looked less like justice and more like manipulation. Her credibility wobbled. Her tone changed. The media backed off. But Clara? She never apologized. Never blinked. At the next hearing, she looked right past me, as if I were already gone. I won the case. The judge dismissed her claim, citing lack of evidence, conflicting statements, and clear motive of gain. He called her actions disingenuous. She didn't stay to hear the verdict. She walked out, heels clicking, sunglasses on, not even glancing at me. The victory felt like ash in my mouth. There were no cheers, no justice, just silence. I sat in my old kitchen that night, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the door she used to run through with muddy shoes and drawings for the fridge. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was hollow. She was gone. Not just physically, but truly deeply gone. The house was quiet again, but not the comforting kind of quiet. More like the silence after an explosion, when the dust still hangs in the air and no one knows what to say. I had won. legally at least, but in every other way, I had lost. The day after the verdict, I opened the living room windows and let the spring air roll in. The curtains fluttered like they were trying to escape. A robin perched on the windowsill. It chirped once and flew off. I thought of Clara's first day of school. She had cried, clinging to my hand, afraid of the other children. I had bent down, whispered, "You're brave. You'll come back and tell me everything. I'll be waiting." And I always waited, every single day, even in the rain, even when I was sick. But now there was nothing left to wait for. Tomasz called to check on me. I told him I was fine. He didn't believe me, but he respected the lie. He offered counseling resources. Sometimes he said gently, "The legal process is only half the healing." I told him thank you and hung up. I didn't need a therapist to tell me I'd been betrayed by the person I loved most. That wasn't something you could fix. It was something you learned to carry. I started clearing the attic one day. Boxes of Clara's childhood. Drawings, dolls, school essays, birthday cards she made with glitter and crooked hearts. I sat for hours on the floor, surrounded by memories that no longer felt safe to hold. I found a letter she'd written when she was 12. "Dear Mama," it began, "you are the strongest person I know. I want to be just like you when I grow up. Love, Clara." Pressed the page to my face and inhaled, as if I could breathe back time. Weeks passed. Clara didn't reach out, not to apologize, not to explain, but she did release a statement, cold, polished, lawyer approved. It read, "I respect the court's decision. I pursued this matter based on personal convictions. I hope for healing and privacy moving forward." Healing, she meant forgetting. She meant rewriting. I received a knock at the door one Saturday. It was my neighbor Renata, holding a basket of rolls. "I heard everything," she said, eyes soft. I braced myself. I just wanted to say, "I know what kind of mother you were. You didn't deserve this." And then she hugged me. It broke something open in me. Tears fell, ugly, grateful tears, because for the first time in weeks, someone believed me. Someone saw me, not as a headline or cautionary tale, but as a mother who tried. I started walking more. Every evening, down the street, past the river, I saw families, mothers with toddlers, teenagers rolling their eyes, old women feeding pigeons, and I wondered, how many of them would one day be forgotten? How many would be punished for doing their best? One evening, as I passed a bookstore, I saw her again, Clara. Inside, she was signing copies of a new book, Raising Myself, How I Survived a Mother's Love. I froze. My throat tightened as I watched. Her from outside the glass, elegant, confident, applauded. A woman approached her with tears in her eyes. They hugged. Someone took photos. Clara smiled, polished, radiant, untouched. I didn't go in. I couldn't, but I did walk home differently that night. Slower, heavier. Thomas called again the next day. "There's talk of her getting a TV deal," he said. "You should prepare. This won't disappear." I didn't reply. He hesitated. "Do you want to fight it? A defamation case." I considered it, not for revenge, but to reclaim my name. To say, this isn't the truth. I'm not who she says I am. But what good would it do? People believed what made them feel empowered. Clara wasn't selling lies. She was selling catharsis. A generation angry at their parents saw themselves in her. Even if I stood on rooftops and screamed, no one wanted to hear a mother's side, especially not one who'd already been put on trial in the court of public opinion. So, I did what no one expected. I wrote her a letter. Clara, you were always smarter than me. Braver too, in many ways. I don't understand what made you do what you did, but I still remember the girl who used to hold my hand in crowds and whisper, "Don't let go." I never did, even when you pushed. Even now, I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope it fills the hole I clearly couldn't. I'll be here, not waiting, but surviving, like I taught you. Love, your mother. I didn't send it, but I read it aloud to myself every night for a week. It helped. Summer came. The sun stayed longer in the sky. The garden bloomed despite everything. I bought new curtains, painted the kitchen pale yellow, threw out the cracked mug, and then one afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself fully. Wrinkles, graying hair, eyes that had cried too many times, but also shoulders that carried years, hands that fed and cleaned and consoled, a body that had borne life and kept standing after it left. I wasn't a villain. I wasn't perfect either. I was just a mother. The leaves turned gold again. Autumn swept in with its quiet dignity, covering everything in a soft, amber hush. It had been almost a year since Clara had taken me to court, since she'd rewritten our history for the world to applaud. And yet, in all that time, I hadn't heard her voice. Not once. No call, no letter, no knock on the door, just silence. But silence is never really empty. It echoes. Some mornings, I swore I heard her footsteps in the hall. Other times, I'd wake up in a panic, thinking I'd overslept and missed her school drop-off. Muscle memory. Even grief has a rhythm. I started volunteering at the community center, helping other women, mothers escaping abusive relationships, grandmothers raising grandchildren, sisters torn between obligation and resentment. Their stories were messy, real, human, and strangely, I found pieces of myself in every one of them. We became a circle of women carrying invisible wounds. We didn't need to speak them aloud. We saw them in each other's eyes. Sometimes, healing isn't about fixing the story. It's about being witnessed in it. Then, one Wednesday in October, something changed. I came home from the center and found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just my name. In her handwriting. I stood at the door for several minutes, heart pounding. Then I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Clara, as a toddler, sitting on my lap. We were both laughing. It wasn't posed. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. On the back, in small writing. I remembered this today. That's all. No apology. No explanation. But for the first time, something more honest than either. I didn't reply. Not out of pride, but because there was nothing more to say. She had broken something in me that could not be mended with fragments of memory. But I appreciated the offering. It meant she remembered I was once her home. Weeks passed. Life carried on. One evening, as I folded laundry, the news played in the background. A segment aired. Daughter who sued mother, now advocates for parental accountability bill. I watched in silence. Clara spoke with confidence, poised, professional. Sometimes love isn't enough, she said. Sometimes we have to acknowledge harm, even when it comes from those who raised us. The host nodded solemnly. And how's your relationship with your mother now? Clara paused, then said, We're not in contact. Some bridges stay burned. A clean answer, a final statement, a public burial. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. She had turned me into a symbol, a placeholder for generational pain. I wasn't her mother anymore. I was every controlling, misunderstood, invisible mother in her narrative. And yet, She still kept that photo. So maybe, beneath the headlines and hashtags, there was still a girl in her who remembered the warmth of my arms. Months later, I got a call. My friend Renata's daughter was in labor. They needed someone to watch her son for the night. I agreed without thinking. That evening, 5-year-old Leo sat on my carpet, coloring dinosaurs while I made soup. He asked, "Do you have kids?" I hesitated, then said, "I did." He looked up. "Where is she?" "She grew up." Leo frowned. "So she doesn't visit you anymore?" "No, not for a long time." He thought about that for a second, then said, "If I had a mama like you, I'd never leave." And just like that, without knowing, he gave me a moment of grace. It's strange, the way healing comes. Not from apologies, not from closure, but from unexpected moments. Quiet affirmations that you are still worthy of love. Spring came again, another year gone. I planted tulips in the garden and donated Clara's old toys to a shelter. I kept one thing, a hand-drawn Mother's Day card that read, "You are my sunshine, always." I framed it, not out of delusion, but as a reminder that love was real, even if it didn't last. Clara never wrote again. She didn't call on my birthday, didn't visit on Christmas, but I no longer waited. I had learned to live in the silence, not bitter, not broken, just free. Free from proving, free from justifying, free from needing to be seen by someone who had already chosen not to look. And yet, I'll admit something. Some nights, when the wind blows just right and the house feels too still, I whisper her name, not to summon her, just to remember how it once felt on my tongue, soft, sacred, mine. 3 years had passed since the lawsuit, since Clara turned our private life into a public reckoning, since I'd heard her voice outside of television segments and podcast interviews. And then, one rainy afternoon in late April, she came back, but not for me. I saw her through the window. First, a sleek black car pulled into the neighbor's driveway. Mrs. Halverson's house. Clara stepped out in a beige trench coat, her hair shorter now, her walk more confident, measured, like a woman used to being watched. She carried a box. My hands trembled as I peeled back the curtain and watched her knock. It wasn't a mistake. She didn't glance toward my house, didn't hesitate. I didn't exist. Later that evening, I ran into Mrs. Halverson while taking out the trash. "You'll never believe who stopped by today," she said, practically glowing. "Your daughter, Clara." I forced a smile. "Oh?" "She's starting some initiative on elder care, interviewing women who live alone. Said she remembered my stories from when she was little." I nodded. That sounds like her. And then, "Did she say anything about me?" A pause. Mrs. Halverson looked at her shoes. "No, honey, but maybe she will. Next time." That night I couldn't sleep. She had come back, to my street, to my neighbor, but not to me. There was a strange pain in that. Not rage, not grief, just a quiet ache, like being a ghost in your own life. Days passed. Clara returned twice more. Each time she walked past my house, like it was invisible. Each time I felt something inside me press harder against the walls of my ribs. One afternoon, I heard her, laughter through the open window. It was the same laugh I remembered from her childhood. Light, bright, almost musical. It hurt, because I wasn't in it anymore. The third visit, I finally stepped outside. Clara was leaving the neighbor's porch, tucking her phone into her bag. She stopped when she saw me. We both froze. No cameras, no judge, no audience, just a woman and the daughter who had erased her. I nodded slightly. She returned the gesture. Then she said, quietly, "You look well, so do you." Silence. I could have asked why she never wrote again. Could have asked if she ever missed me, but I didn't. Instead, I asked, "Do you ever think of the lake house?" She looked away, then back. Her eyes softened. "All the time," a beat, and then, "I'm sorry for some things." I nodded. "Me too." And just like that, she walked past me, like wind brushing against a tree. Not cruelly, not lovingly, just neutrally. That night, I sat with an old photo album. Clara at age 5, her first bike, her crooked birthday cake. I didn't cry. I just breathed. I'd finally understood something. She hadn't come back to hurt me. She hadn't come back for revenge. She came back because this place, our street, our neighbors, even the lake house in her memory, it had shaped her. I was a part of her roots, whether she admitted it or not, but she no longer needed to return to me because she had become her own tree. Sometimes healing isn't reconciliation. Sometimes it's acceptance. Acceptance that closure doesn't always come with a hug or a shared cup of tea. Sometimes it's a quiet nod on a grey afternoon, and then going your separate ways. The seasons turned again. The tulips bloomed earlier than expected. The neighbors planted lavender. I joined a book club. Life didn't wait for a perfect ending, and neither did I. One morning, I found a letter slipped under my door. No name on the envelope. Inside, a single line. "I remember your lullaby." I hum it to myself when the world feels too loud. No signature. But I knew who it was from, and that was enough.